A very good afternoon. It's 2 p.m. Central African time on day 690 of the lockdown in South Africa. This is the final hour of On Point, coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios. I'm Nompumelelo Siziba, making headlines this hour. President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address is expected to come under intense scrutiny during a two-day debate starting this afternoon. Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lucifi says he will request the Human Rights Commission to probe allegations of racism and other violations at the Hoërskool Jan Viljoen in Randfontein. And oil prices hit a 7-year high on the back of Russia-Ukraine tensions. President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address last week is expected to come under intense scrutiny during the two-day debate starting this afternoon. Ramaphosa will deliver his reply on Wednesday. The appointment of the country's new Chief Justice and the implementation of the recommendations of state capture reports are expected to dominate the two-day debate, which will also take place at the Cape Town City Hall as well as virtually. Ramaphosa drew mixed reactions when he told the nation that job creation was the responsibility of the private sector and that government's role was to provide a conducive environment for business to grow and generate jobs. The State of the Nation debate is scheduled to get underway from this hour. Okay, let's take you live there.
The Secretary, order. Order. The Secretary will read the order of the day.
Debate on the President's State of the Nation address.
Honorable members and guests, in the interest of safety for all present in the chamber, we request that you please keep your masks on and sit in your designated area. Thank you. Honorable members, I've received a copy of the President's address delivered at the joint sitting on the 10th of February 2022. The speech has been printed in the minutes of the joint sitting. Before I call on the first member, honorable members, please note that the President will join us on the virtual setting. Honorable members, I now call upon the leader of the opposition. So the leader of the chamber. I'm sorry. Honorable members, may I just remind you that this is a hybrid session, and in terms of the joint rules, it is acceptable. And the fact that the President will be on the virtual platform. Honorable members, I now call on the Speaker, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Malibongwe. Mandibulele kakhulu kuwe somlomo wendlu National Assembly Speaker, Honorable Chair of the NCOP, His Excellency the President Tata Ramaphosa, His Excellency Deputy President Tata Mabuza, honorable members of this august House, abemi bonke belizwe lakowethu, ndiyabulisa ngale njikalanga. Ongasekhoyo uPresident uNelson Mandela, uMadiba, uNkosi uDalibhunga, ehleli kude kwele mimoya, usijongile namhlanje sikwiliholo lesixeko. Ezi zakhiwo zesixeko kulapho othula khona intetho yakhe yokuqala emva kokuba ekhululwe etolongweni iminyaka engama32 njengommi okhululekileyo kumakhamandela abacinezeli nohulumente wegcuntswana bephethwe okwamakhoboka. Elinani ke lingu-32 years akathetha ngalo apha linentsingiselo ephuhlileyo nebalulekileyo kwimeko esizifumana sikuzo. The number 32 symbolizes freedom and creative expressions, a number that embodies teamwork and optimism. It is within that spirit that we should execute our task. Somlomo, namhlanje sisifumana sicukene kwesi sixeko sikweli holo ngenxa yesithwakumbe esithe sehla sokutsha kwepalamente. Ndiqinisekile into yoba uNkosi uDalibhunga uMadiba usijonge ngamehlo anodano nomphefumlo odandathekileyo kuba isakhiwo sabantu apho umgaqo siseko waze waphuhliswa waphehlelelwa khona sintunyekwe saluthuthu. Ukutshiswa kwezindlu zowiso-mthetho zethu sisenyeliso nesithuko esingcolisa idemokrasi yeli lizwe. Somlomo, it was in that house that now lie in ruins that we passed progressive and numerous legislation to ensure that schooling is compulsory for all children as their birthright, especially children from the poor families. It was in that house that we passed legislation to guarantee all South Africans health services and a social protection to the poor. The Parliament, as a tribune of the people, is critical in attaining the developmental goals of our nation. Noxa kubuhlungu kukraka, umsebenzi wona weParliament awuzukuma. Umsebenzi remains on track in the service of the people. Our gathering here today is an important reminder that our democratic institutions are not just defined by brick and mortar, but by the work they do and by the confidence the people have in institutions of democracy. Standing here today is proof that we will not be deterred by the burning of the Parliament building. Honorable Speaker, abo ke bayivuyelayo beyibhiyozela into yokutsha kweParlamente zizaphuselani ezingalinakanga elilizwe nekamva lethu. Thina singabemi sizakukhusela elilizwe lethu kofunzeweni abalitsalela emva. Abanye benu baza kuquqa apha kweliqonga kwezintsuku zimbini besithi akukho nto yenziweyo. Ayizukusiphazamisa ke lonto. Ingazukusisusa kwindlela esikuyo yokwakha elilizwe. Utata uMandela ubehloko esithundeza esithi xa uqabela intaba wazi wafika encothoyini yazi into yoba ziseninzi indaba ozaziqabela phambi kwakho kufuneka ke uqabele. Somlomo, le ntetho yesizwe yenziwe ngumongameli ngoLwesine wale veki iphelileyo ibhentsisa ngokunyanisekileyo indima ehanjwe ngurhulumente we-ANC kunye nemingeni esidibene nayo. Abantu bazayiqonda into yoba asifihli makhuba kulinywa. Esi siyelegu sokutshiswa kweParlamente yethu sifika sisakhwankqiswe kukutunywekwa kwezakhiwo ukubiwa kwempahla kwinyanga kaJulayi kulo nyaka uphelileyo kwiphondo laKwaZulu-Natal nelaseGauteng. Kwadodobaliswa konakaliswa iziseko, kwadodobaliswa uqoqosho, kwashiyeka izijwili, kwabhuqa inxele likakhetsekile. Siyayinyevulela ke le mikhuba mibi kangaka yobholela ecaleni. Honorable Speaker, the State of the Nation address for the ANC reflects an honest account on progress and challenges on what needs to be done. It was an action-oriented State of the Nation address which is time-bound on implementation. Despite the destruction of KZN and Gauteng, our government, working with the people of these communities, restored all social services timeously. We thank all South Africans who displayed their patriotism through helping to restore dignity and normalcy. It is through our collective efforts as a nation that we will be able to defeat all attempts to undermine our democratic order. The commitment by the President to strengthen our security cluster and address its capacity deficiencies as well as capabilities is critical and must be commended. Somlomo, our biggest challenge as a country is to address the legacy of injustice of the past, where we remain unresolved in increasing unemployment, deepening poverty, and widening inequality. Siyayincoma indima esele ithathiwe ngurhulumente ekubuyiseleni uzinzo kunye nenkonzo kulamaphondo omabini. Lonto ke ibonisa ukuba urhulumente xa esebenza nabantu kungenziwa lukhulu. Owona mngeni sijongene nawe ngoku kukugqiba lo mzila wengcinezelo, ukulwa indlala egqibileyo kubantu bakowethu, ukungalingani kunye nokunqaba kwemisebenzi. Umongameli uhlabe umkhosi esithi masimanyane senze isifungo sendibano kazwelonke ukuze sibe sisizwe sinamandla. Ibalulekile ke lonto ukuba okufunwa ngabantu yimisebenzi ebonakalayo, okufunwa ngabantu yimisebenzi esisigcina. Oyena ndoqo kwesi sivumelwano yintsebenziswano, kufuneka ke sivumelane ngayo kwenza inguqu kwezoqoqosho kweli lizwe lakowethu khona ukuze bonke abantu balo baxhamle kulo. Honorable Speaker, as the ANC, you are fully behind the bold economic moves by government announced last week. As part of this plan, we have undertaken several economic reforms in areas such as energy security, the efficiency of our ports, digital migration, access to broadband, and ease of doing business. Recognizing that it will take time for business to recover from the pandemic and begin to create jobs again, government implemented the presidential employment stimulus, which in the first phase created more than 850,000 employment and livelihood support opportunities. We therefore continue to support government's decision to implement a public employment program in support of unemployed working age adults. This will be done in consultation with organized labor and other social partners as part of the social compact. Building on the achievements of 2021 SONA, this SONA has expressed itself on 50,000 young people that will be recruited for the National Youth Services and 10,000 unemployed TVET graduates that will be placed. Somlomo bekekileyo siyawamkela amanyathelo angqingqwa apapashiweyo okulwa nendlala esiwabonayo kuba ayakhawulelana nengxaki ezenziwe ngulobhubhane we-COVID-19 kunye nodushelwa ngoJulayi. Esi sibonelelo se-350 siyambile indima ekubeni sincede kumakhaya abeweswele kakhulu, apho kuye kwaxhamla 9.5 million yolutsha kunye namakhaya ayi-5 million apho bokukho intlupheko kakhulu. The 350 social relief for distress is meant to assist unemployed between the age of 18 and 59 as they do not receive social protection income. It is important that those who are beneficiaries of this grant must use it to provide for the little that they can in their homes, for traveling, for food, for communication costs, as well as to update their CVs as they will be knocking on various areas trying to get jobs. Kubalulekile ke into yoba ndike ndiyichaze into yoba phaya ngelixesha silungiselela uvoto phaya eKomani uba uyazijonga iposi ayikho kude nendawo esithengisa utywala, abantu baphume eposini neza 350 babheke kwindawo yotywala. Xa ubuza into yoba kanti ekhaya kuzawutyiwa ntoni na, athi hayi imali yengozi le, imali yengozi ayingena endlini, ufuna kuyifumana uyitye uyigqibele kwakule ndawo. So ayiyo mali yengozi ke le, mayivunyelwe le mali iphinde ekhaya khona ukuze kube khona into etyiwayo. Esi sibonelelo ke senzelwe side senza abantu bacula ingoma ngelixesha lika December bathi uRamaphosa uyamthanda umahlalela uvela amniki 350 into yoba leyo ndlu ingavumi into yoba sicule. Ngaba ndiyakuculela Somlomo ngoba into yoba uyivanga le ngoma uvela amniki 350. It is critical that we infuse a vigorous pace of agility in our economic reconstruction and recovery plan. For the DA, Honorable Steenhuisen, through you, Speaker, the claim that we plagiarized their manifesto in the president's plan is an overreach. It's an overreach. For a party that believes in market fundamentalism and sees no meaningful interventions by the state, it is reach to claim such wisdom. Our economic perspectives are fundamentally different with the DA. We believe in the need for government to create an enabling environment for business to flourish, not some hostile takeover. Similarly, we disagree with the EFF with the EFF's flawed approach, the partnership with the private sector ought to be enhanced to ensure the efficient provision of service delivery. This is fundamental reason why we have always been proponents of black economic empowerment with the ultimate aim of ensuring job creation so that the economy truly benefits the majority of this country historically disadvantaged citizens. Unlike the right-wing Freedom Front Plus and its liberal DA, who do not support the empowerment of black people, no wonder no black African leader lasts in a leadership position in the DA. Government alone cannot address rising unemployment, and we support call by the President for the private sector to increase productivity, investments in particular in those sectors of the economy which creates jobs. Kungoko siluxhasa ikhwelo likamongameli elithi amashishini abucala mawasondele ukuze sonke sakhe elilizwe. Siyayibethelela intetho kamongameli esithi urhulumente xa esebenza yedwa akana ukwazi ujongana nomcelimngeni ingakumbi lo wengqesho. Somlomo, the formation of the African National Congress was based on addressing the land question. The wars of resistance fought by our forebears were against land dispossession. Futhi ke ANC sifuna ukuyibeka icaca into yokuba sithi umhlaba mawubuyele ebantwini abantsundu. Abasisininzi selilizwe sizakuqhubeka ANC nemigaqo nkqubo yokubuyisa wabiwe uphuhliswe usetyenzwe umhlaba sisebenzisa imithetho efana ne-Land Court Bill kunye ne-Expropriation Bill, which was preceded by vigorous public hearings. As we committed during when the sixth Parliament started and pledged to basi Parliament sakuyiqinisa indlela yokuphonononga inkqubo zikaRhulumente, will continue to play our enhanced and robust oversight. We stand here with the authority to affirm that the Electoral Reforms Bill has been tabled in Parliament, and we call on all people of South Africa to comment during the public hearings. ANC siyayixhasa inzame zikaRhulumente zokulwa qhophololo buqhetseba kunye nobuhalahume ezifana ne-Commission of Inquiry into State Capture kunye nophando olwenziwa yi-SIU ne-Hawks kwimibandela yorhwaphilizo. Siyayamkela into yoba kubekho abantu ababanjiweyo kwaye kubuyiswe nemali ethe yabiwa. Siyazibophelela siyi-ANC ukuba apha eParlamente uba yonke ingxelo ethe yaziswa sizayilandela into yoba mayi-implementwe. Somlomo, funeka simanyane ukulwa ukunyashwa kwamalungelo omama abantwana abo bakhubazekileyo nabo baphila kwisini esinye. Bonke abaphembeleli be-gender based violence and femicide funeka babanjwe. Siyayibulela mongameli into yoba uye uze ne-strategic plan kwaye uqinisekise into yoba uyayisayina imithetho emithathu epaswa yile Parliamente khona ukuze singenelele kwimpatho gadalala yoomama nabantwana. Le mithetho kananjalo incedisa into yoba oomama bakwazi ukufumana i-protection orders online, bangahambi bayojongana baqubisane naba bantu babahlukumezayo abababamba ngobhomngwana. Le mithetho kananjalo ithi ityala aliboli, ingakumbi ityala lodlwengulo nokuba ubudlwengulo iminyaka engama-20 eyodlulayo, kodwa le mithetho uzawubanjwa uthi nca. Okwesithathu, ezinkundla zingamashumi-32 kwi-regions zinika omama isidima sokuba amatyala ohlukunyezo angaxoxwa esidlangalaleni kusiva wonke umntu kwaye akhawuleziswe ahlonitshwe umama akhuselwe isidima sakhe kugwetywe abo benze okubi. Xa ndizawugqibela, Somlomo, our unity and diversity remains our strength. All South Africans should be committed to eradicating backward tendencies of tribalism, racism, patriarchy, and discrimination of the LGBTIQ+ community.
Honorable member, your time is up. Thank you. I thank you. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, the Honourable President, wherever he is today, honourable members, this is a strange SONA to debate because large parts of the President's speech are straight from the DA's playbook. Let's be clear, that is a good thing. It's a good thing. Because what we need if we want to fight poverty is agreement of where and how jobs are created. And for the very first time, someone from that side of the House seems to get it. If we're honest, on Thursday night, the President didn't sound like a man leading the ANC, a party obsessed with centralized control of the economy and reliant on a massively bloated public sector. Channeling the DA, he said, and I quote, "Government doesn't create jobs, businesses create jobs. Government must create the conditions that will enable the private sector," unquote. But as we've seen today, what remains unclear is which of these views represents the real ANC. For almost 3 decades, this government has done about all that it possibly could to discourage job creation in the private sector through terrible, draconian regulations and labour laws. For almost 3 decades, the ANC has stuck to its ideological guns of putting government and the state at the centre of economic growth and job creation. And for almost 3 decades, it's treated the small business owner as the enemy, doing all it can to extract taxes and exhaust their goodwill, forcing them to jump through extraordinary hoops of compliance and regulations, BE, and a raft of other irrational requirements, not to mention the COVID regulations. And then suddenly, on Thursday night, we hear a different story. So what has changed? Now, Mr. President, I'm sure that you have seen and heard the analyst comments that you must have been reading the DA manifesto. But I agree with the Chief Whip of the ANC. But that statement needs to be corrected. Because a manifesto is merely a declaration of intentions, not achievements. Anybody can talk about what they want to do and the things that they would like to see done. None of the things that you appropriated from the DA came from a wish list. They are things we already do where we are in government. And so, you didn't borrow from the DA's manifesto, you took directly from the DA's track record. And that's a good thing. And it's also a very important distinction to make when trying to understand why this economy under your government remains trapped in quicksand. You see, it all comes down to the difference between talking and doing. And that's what we need to keep in mind when we debate the positive things that you said on Thursday. Are any of them likely to happen? So you talk about building a capable professional state, but you still insist on deploying unsuitable party loyalists to every single corner of the state. Meanwhile, the DA has shown you exactly what a capable, merit-based state can look like. You talk about solving the energy crisis and ending load shedding, and you've been talking about this for well over a decade now. But as we speak, DA governments stand ready to buy their power directly from independent power producers. You talk about making it easier for small and medium enterprises to operate and comply with regulations by cutting red tape, while the DA does exactly this. The Western Cape government has an incredibly successful red tape reduction unit, and we introduced a similar bill in Parliament only to have it shot down by the President's own party. You talk about paying government suppliers on time. DA governments consistently pay their suppliers within 30 days. You see, Mr. President, talking is easy, but doing makes the difference. And that is the DA difference. Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis has promised to make Cape Town the most business-friendly city on the continent and put it right up there amongst the best in the world. You might also know that Cape Town already tops the ease of doing business rankings in South Africa. And this has had a profound effect on new investments, which in turn has spared its residents the worst of the country's unemployment bloodbath. But that's not good enough. The rest of South Africa cannot be the benchmark. It's just too low. Cape Town wants to measure itself against the world and wants to roll out the red carpet for every possible new job-creating business. And that's what we mean by the DA difference, the measurable way in which people's lives improve where the DA governs. Mr. President, you even acknowledged this DA difference in the wake of the Parliament fire when you said, and I quote, "We do have one city that works, a province that works, and a government that works when the chips are down," unquote. The biggest DA difference of all is that we get things done. You talk year after year, the DA gets it done. It could have all been very different though, Mr. President, when you embarked on your presidency some 4 years ago. You had all the goodwill and support that you needed to put our country back on its feet. It wasn't going to be easy, but you had it perfectly teed up. You were the darling of the media, businesses were falling over themselves to give money, and all you had to do was start delivering on some of your promises of your first SONA. Just a little bit of progress, and then a little bit more the following year, and a little bit more the next year. But the reality is that very little happened. And so South Africa's heard the same pronouncements and promises each year about how jobs are going to be created, how load shedding will end, how broadband spectrum will be auctioned, and how corruption would finally be dealt with. Every year, another task team, another social compact, another commission, another roadshow, another stakeholder engagement, all just kicking the can down the road at taxpayer expense. Now you tell us that your government has given itself, and I quote, 100 days to finalize a social compact to grow our economy, create jobs, and combat hunger, unquote. Now, no one here can argue with that. They're incredible goals. But what were you doing for the last 100 days, or the last 1,000 days for that matter? Our country's been in an absolute crisis for a very long time. And it's incomprehensible that you arrive at a SONA to tell us that you're now going to start thinking a plan. You should have used SONA to announce the plan. And not only the plan, but the progress on implementation. Don't say, do. And again on Thursday, you told us that those responsible for state capture will be punished. But if you'd read the first 2 reports of the Zondo Commission, you would know that you still continue to employ many of those implicated in your own cabinet. In your 5th State of the Nation address, you're still promising South Africa prosecutions, yet not one of those implicated cadres has been charged or convicted. Don't say, do. So while I'd love to feel buoyed by the newfound insights of job creation, small enterprises, cutting red tape, simplifying labor laws, supporting our nation's employers, I've seen this film enough times to know that this is where it likely ends. And so does everyone else, which is why the common theme of the media analysis post your SONA was nice words, pity it will never happen. After all that goodwill and hope 4 years ago, you have today become the president of the comforting catchphrase, the soothing reassurance, and the empty promises. Doctor, do nothing. But here's the thing, Mr. President. We cannot have a conversation about this inaction without turning our attention to the real elephant in the room. Or should I say the 64 elephants in the room. And you know what I'm talking about, Mr. President. It's your cabinet ministers and their deputies. 64 of you, including 28 ministers, 34 deputy ministers, plus the deputy president and yourself. Even after trimming and consolidating ministries, you still preside over one of the biggest cabinets in the world. A massive jobs for cadres scheme where no one is too corrupt, too lazy, or too useless to land one of these plush jobs. Every energy reform, every measure to unshackle our economy, every intention to support small businesses is going to sink like a ton of bricks the moment you walk into your first cabinet meeting. Almost no one on your executive would be employable in the private sector. And frankly, you know that some of them should be behind bars. But instead of cleaning out your cabinet, you simply reshuffle the corrupt again and again until every single ministry has the grubby fingerprints of failure all over it. You stand up in SONA and you talk about building a capable state, but you're not prepared to walk away from the very essence of state capture and the incapable state, the policy of cadre deployment. Clearly, Mr. President, you know what I'm saying is true. You know that your cabinet cannot be trusted to get things done. You've effectively admitted that by now setting up a parallel state in your own presidency. Your appointments like Sipho Nkosi, Mavuso Mzimang and Daniel Manele to do the job of your cabinet says it all. In a functional democracy, you would have fired most of your cabinet a long time ago. But we all know why you haven't. We've seen the video where without a hint of shame, you tell the room that you would rather be seen as a weak president than split the ANC, because that is not your mission. Your mission is to keep the ANC united. In other words, you see your job as holding together this ragtag mob of crooks and freeloaders, even if that means the destruction of our country. Why else would Minister Bheki Cele still have a job in your cabinet after the spectacular failure of the SAPs to protect people's lives and property during the riots of last year? Over 300 people lost their lives. You should hold him accountable, but you don't. Why does Minister Ayanda Dlodlo still have a job in your cabinet? As Minister of State Security, the lack of state intelligence during and preceding the July riots fell squarely on her shoulders. You should hold her accountable, but instead you simply redeployed her to public service and administration, while the third person responsible for July's chaos, the Defence Minister, found herself redeployed as the Speaker in this House. Why does Minister Lindiwe Sisulu still have a job as Tourism Minister? Over the past 28 years, she's left a trail of mediocrity across 5 different departments. And if that wasn't enough to get rid of her, surely her despicable attack on the judiciary and our Constitution was. Why does Minister Gwede Mantashe still have a job as Energy Minister? We've now entered our 14th year of load shedding. There are children at high school who've never known a life without blackouts. You can't speak to the world about green energy and fixing our electricity crisis while Mr. Cole can't see beyond fossil fuels. Will you hold him accountable for dragging our country back into the dark ages? Of course not. Why does Minister Patricia de Lille still have a job with Public Works? If the Beitbridge border fence fiasco wasn't enough reason to sack her, then surely the fact that our Parliament burnt down on her watch should be. Why does Minister Angie Motshekga still serve as our Education Minister? She's had the same job for 13 years now. During this time, almost 6 million children have dropped out of school. Forget about the pass rate that she crows about every single year. It means nothing when half of the children in our country do not sit down to write their exams. If our widening inequality is as important as you try to make it sound, that is where you should start looking. Why does Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams still have a job as Minister of Small Business Development? Her transgressions in her previous role as the Communications Minister and her flouting of lockdown regulations were already enough to fire her. So why promote her to this crucial portfolio, only then to appoint an outsider to come in and do her job? Why does Minister Lindiwe Zulu still have a job in your cabinet? Surely, when you saw her spraying people with a water cannon for the crime of waiting in a queue to collect a SASSA grant, there should have been no doubt that she's not suitable for the job. But there she is, still your Minister of Social Development. It seems like her and Minister Mbalula, just like every other deadbeat minister, are simply unfireable. And finally, why does Minister Ibrahim Patel still serve in your cabinet? If indeed you believe, as you said last week, that the private sector and not government should be creating jobs, why put a sworn communist in charge of trade and industry? A large part of our 46.6% unemployment rate stems from that. Accountability is something you only talk about, because actually doing something would mean firing some of your cabinet and upsetting your comrades. So, here's what's going to happen, Mr. President. Because you've shown that you're a president of talk and not a president of action, we are going to make it easier for you. Today, I've tabled a motion of no confidence, not in you, but in your whole cabinet, in terms of Section 102(1) of the Constitution. If it's not possible for you to do right by the people of South Africa, then we're going to take the burden off your hands and let this House fire them for you. Once we've done that, we're going to bring back all of our bills of reform to this House. The ISMO bill, the Ease of Doing Business bill, our Red Tape Impact Assessment bill, our Public Investment Corporation Amendment bill, our Small Enterprise Ombudsman bill, and our End Cadre Deployment bill. And then we'll let this House help you do your job by implementing the reforms that you could only talk about. And while we're doing that, our governments and metros and municipalities across the country will help you do your job by becoming less dependent on Eskom, by taking over more policing powers from national government, and hopefully by taking over and fixing commuter rail. Our governments will be doing all they can to fix the mess that you created in our schools. And our governments will make it easier to do business and create jobs as we try to undo the decades worth of damage of your failed economic policies. Because we cannot sit through another year of your talk while our country slides further and further backwards and millions more of our citizens fall into poverty and unemployment. So, Mr. President, you can either stand back and watch us take over your duties one by one, or you can let us help you break the paralysis of your presidency by pushing through your own reforms in this House. I assure you, as I've done on many times before, that you will find a huge deal of support on our side of the House to get this reform agenda driven through Parliament. Mr. President, you may have just enough time left to rewrite your presidency and to build a legacy. But it's going to require you taking action, and action now. So what do you say, Mr. President, wherever you may be? Are we going to help you fire your cabinet and give your executive a new start? Will you let us help you drive through the economic reforms that are so desperately needed and which you spoke about on your SONA address, and which we know, as we've heard today, that your own comrades do not support? Or are you going to be content to see out your presidency and your term of office as the president who was too afraid to put his country before his party? That choice, Mr. President, is yours. Thank you.